Chapter 2072. Will you agree? Itsuka Kotori clenched her fists tightly. She looked very nervous. After all, elves gave people the impression that they were extremely mysterious creatures, and it was extremely difficult to communicate with them. Getting along with humans and coexisting in the same space was even more difficult. No problem. After a few seconds of silence, Dustless was surprisingly easy to talk to. He even smiled at Itsuka Kotori. That's great. Come home with me. Itsuka Kotori wiped the sweat off her face when she heard Dustless agree. She thought to herself, this elf is not as hard to deal with as I thought. In her mind, elves were vulgar people who would start a fight at the slightest provocation. Itsuka Kotori was surprised that Dustless was so well-mannered. Very easy to deal with. If all elves are like this, I don't need Shido's help. Itsuka Kotori's eyes narrowed into crescents. She looked at Wu-chin with confidence. At the same time, he opened his mouth and was about to set the rules. However, Wu-chin's voice sounded in advance. You have a brother, right? I think his name is Itsuka Shido. I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in living under the same roof as a man. So, please ask him to move out. Wu-chin looked into Itsuka Kotori's eyes, his tone was firm and unquestionable. Ha! Itsuka Kotori was stunned when she heard Dustless's words. You want Shido to move out? Are you kidding me? You need to know who you are. We are the owners, and you are just a lodger. Itsuka Kotori rolled up her sleeves and resisted the urge to beat Dustless to death. She warned loudly, Kid, get this straight. You're the invader. An outsider wants the original owner to move out. Take over the nest. Not a chance. Is that so? Hearing this, Wu-chin just nodded slightly, then suddenly turned around and left. Then I'll take my leave. You don't have to look for me. I'm going to destroy the world now that I'm heartbroken. This bastard, Itsuka Kotori's mouth twitched, and she almost swallowed the lollipop in her mouth. Stop right there. Itsuka Kotori yelled and chased after Chin Xiaobei. Little girl, you think you can fight with me? Don't overestimate yourself. Dustless looked back at Itsuka Kotori and smiled. Stop right there. Itsuka Kotori stood in front of Dustless with her hands on her hips and said, You win. I agree to your terms. That's more like it. Hearing this, Wu-chin chuckled, and then said meaningfully, Soon, you will feel lucky for your decision. Itsuka Shido's apartment. Ha! You want me to move out? Shido stared at Itsuka Kotori in bewilderment. His head was buzzing. He widened his eyes and looked at the helpless girl. Then, he looked at Wu-chin who was resting on the sofa. Suddenly, he felt that his brain wasn't enough. Itsuka Shido almost vomited blood. His position in the family was lower than an outsider like Dustless. Cough cough cough, Itsuka Kotori coughed awkwardly. She felt sorry for Itsuka Shido since he was her brother. But she remembered Dustless's terms and conditions and could only accept it. Shido, don't worry and move out. I'll take care of the house from now on. Itsuka Kotori patted her chest like an adult. Someone will take care of us. Someone else will take care of the cooking. Someone will take care of us. Itsuka Shido looked at Itsuka Kotori in shock. His sister was good at eating, but cooking wasn't her forte. Could it be him? Itsuka Shido looked at Dustless suspiciously. He didn't think that Dustless knew how to cook. His skin was as white as snow and his fingers were long and straight. He didn't look like someone who had cooked before. Creak, at the same time, the closed door was pushed open and a beautiful figure came into view. It's her. Dustless muttered. His calm eyes rippled with surprise. Dustless was familiar with this person. It was a young woman with a beautiful face and a perfect body. She was one of the prettiest women in the country. The only thing that was not complimentary about her was that she looked like she was in a trance. Her eyes were dark and she was wobbling as if she could fall at any moment. It was as if she hadn't slept for years. So it's Murasame Rain. This unreliable woman was Murasame Rain, the analyst of Ratatosk. This is interesting. Does this woman know how to cook? I think she's here to monitor me and test my data. Dustless closed his eyes again. He wasn't surprised. With Itsuka Kotori's status, it wasn't a problem to mobilize her. There had never been a male elf before. Sending Murasame Rain to test Dustless's data was normal. These guys really think I'm an elf. Dustless sighed helplessly. It wasn't a good thing to be treated as an elf. He would be watched and watched. Sometimes, there would even be flies like AST harassing him. It was really annoying. What bad luck. Itsuka Shido looked at Dustless unhappily and suddenly went to his room. It seemed like he was going to pack his clothes and leave. P.S. 3,000 flowers plus updates, 3,000 rewards plus updates, 1,000 reviews plus updates, 500 automatic subscriptions plus updates. Chapter 2073. Time flew by, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Itsuka Shido's home. No, it should be Dustless's home now. The former had been expelled, and now there were only 3 people left in his home: Dustless, Itsuka Kotori, and Rain Murasame. As for Itsuka Shido, he was kicked out of the house. Strange. Rain Murasame frowned and looked at Dustless, and the dark circles under her eyes wrinkled a few times. I didn't detect psychic waves from Dustless. Psychic waves could be detected from elves, but Dustless didn't have this kind of energy fluctuation, which indirectly indicated that Dustless was not an elf. Not an elf. Looking at Rain Murasame suspiciously, Itsuka Kotori rarely doubted this confidant. If he's not an elf, Dustless is even more strange. Thinking of the battle that day, Itsuka Kotori cautiously said, he used overwhelming strength to defeat AST that day. If he's not an elf, doesn't that mean Dustless is a human? Lane, have you seen such a powerful human like Dustless? No, if Dustless is really a human, he's definitely the strongest one. Murasame Rain Murasame's tone couldn't help but stagnate. It was the first time she encountered such an incredible and bizarre event. A human, without using the slightest equipment, defeated AST with overwhelming strength, which was an extremely amazing event in itself. So, we must pay closer attention to him. Itsuka Kotori crossed her arms, touched her chin, and wisely said, this kind of person is no less dangerous than elves, we can't be careless. But who will monitor you when you go to school? Murasame Rain Murasame asked. It's very simple. Itsuka Kotori, who was wearing pajamas, walked elegantly, and skipped toward Dustless, and the corner of her mouth revealed an imperceptible arc. What's the matter? Dustless, who was bored reading the newspaper, asked flatly. His tone was always calm, and it gave people the feeling that he was as calm as thunder. You. Hearing Wu Chen's arrogant tone, Itsuka Kotori was furious. She said angrily, watch your tone. The owner of this house is called Itsuka. You're right. Dustless was noncommittal. He lowered his head and said, the sign at the door is indeed Dustless's house. I think it should be changed to Dustless's house now. From now on, this is my territory. Poochie. Murasame Rain, who was drinking milk, spat it out and looked at Dustless with a cold face. She secretly gave him a thumbs up. Daring to say such words in front of Itsuka Kotori, this guy must be brave. Don't push your luck. Itsuka Kotori was infuriated. She pointed a trembling finger at Dustless and scolded, shameless. How shameless can you be? Suddenly, Itsuka Kotori's voice stopped abruptly. She suddenly felt cold all over, as if some prehistoric creature was staring at her. She couldn't help but shiver uncontrollably. Shoo shoo shoo. A chilly wind started to blow in the large room. Kotori glanced at Rain Murasame and knew that her worries were unfounded, so she said helplessly, "Rain, it's not about whether it's appropriate or not, it's just that we don't have any other choice." Kotori couldn't think of any other plan other than using Shido's power to tame the elves. Although Dustless was an exception, Kotori didn't think that other elves were as easy to deal with as Dustless. Elves were naturally repulsed by unfamiliar environments and humans. Bang! Inside Shido's classroom, Itsuki Kotori kicked open the classroom door and dragged Shido out of there, ignoring everyone's shock. "Shido, the mission of saving the world is yours." Kotori dragged Shido away after saying that. As for Rain Murasame, she stayed behind to mediate the situation for Kotori. Other than Shido, no one else could deal with the elves. Shido was the only one who had the power to seal the elves, so he was the only choice. "Kotori, let go of me." Inside the hallway, Shido, who was almost strangled to death, struggled to get up. This was the first time he saw Kotori being so rough. "Don't waste time, come with me now." Kotori glared at Shido and dragged him to the center of the spacequake. "That's the center of the spacequake, are you crazy?" Shido was shocked when he saw where Kotori was going. He yelled, "Come with me now, kids shouldn't be messing around." Unfortunately, Kotori didn't appreciate it. She didn't even look at him as she dragged Shido out of the school. Humph. The commander mode at Itsuki Kotori was indeed extraordinary. She was strong in every aspect. Seeing that her door was locked from the inside, and she didn't have the key, she kicked it without hesitation. Bam! Not sure where Itsuki Kotori got her strength from, but she kicked the door open. This little girl is really merciless. "Be careful, this is my house." Wuchen looked over and couldn't help but shake his head. When he saw Itsuka Shido's bitter face, he pretended not to see anything and continued reading the newspaper. "Your house. The owner of this house is Shido." Itsuki Kotori almost jumped up and glared at Dustless. She had never heard of such a domineering elf like Dustless. The planet he was stepping on was hers. How could he be so domineering and barbaric? This kind of rude and unreasonable behavior was even worse than robbery. P.S. 3,000 fresh flowers plus more chapters, 3,000 rewards plus more chapters, 1,000 comments plus more chapters, 500 automatic subscriptions plus more chapters. Chapter 2075. The door of your house. The owner of this house is Itsuka. Itsuki Kotori almost jumped out of her seat and glared at Dustless. She had never heard of an elf as domineering as Dustless. The planet he was standing on was hers. How could he be so barbaric? This kind of rude and unreasonable behavior was even worse than robbery. Staring at the angry girl, Wuchen just smiled gently without saying anything. Boom boom boom. At this moment, the violent tremors came again. The surface of the ground was easily torn apart, revealing shocking cracks. The vast land seemed to be on top of the sea, swaying non-stop. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. "Kotori, let's get out of here. It's not safe here. We might be destroyed by the elves at any time." Itsuka Shido was in a terrible state. His body was trembling in fear. This was normal. After all, he was a human. Most humans would feel fear when facing an elf. No. Itsuki Kotori rejected Itsuka Shido's suggestion and quickly explained, "Shido, I have a mission for you. You will go on a date with that elf for me later." "A date?" Itsuka Shido's face twitched. He looked at Itsuka Kotori speechlessly. He could go on a date with anyone, but he had to go on a date with an elf. Wasn't this pushing himself into a fire pit? It was an obvious act of suicide. "Let me explain." Itsuki Kotori sighed and began to explain the nature of the date. "This is too much. Dustless walked to the window lazily and looked up at the sky. His gaze froze when he saw the girl standing in the sky. He mumbled to himself, Night Sword God Toka. She seems to be quite strong. The girl standing in the sky had a head of long purple hair. She held a chilling sword in her hand. Her eyes were as dazzling as purple gems. Her skin was fair and flawless. Her perfect face had a hint of sadness. Her eyes were gloomy and hesitant. It seemed like she was unfamiliar with this world. So this is Night Sword God Toka. Dustless nodded and sat down on the sofa to read the newspaper. None of this had anything to do with him. Do you understand? Sure Dao. 5 minutes later, Itsuki Kotori explained the meaning of date and said sternly, no matter what, you have to deal with that guy. Shido wanted to cry, but he had no tears. He wanted to reject this mission, but Kotori glared at him. You help me from the side. She took another glance at Dustless and said in a righteous tone, you have to pay if you want to eat here. You're the one who invited me to stay here. Dustless glanced at Itsuki Kotori and said, help you take care of that elf. Sorry, I don't have much time, and I don't like to meddle in other people's business. Anyone would reject a mission that didn't have any benefits and would bring a lot of trouble. You. You heartless bastard. Kotori glared at Dustless and dragged Shido away. Dustless was acting shamelessly, but Kotori didn't have the means to punish Dustless. Itsuka Shido. Dustless stared at Itsuka Shido's back and muttered to himself, this kid seems to have the ability to seal the elf's power. Normal humans don't have that kind of power. I guess it's just a so-so. But. Dustless sighed and said, Itsuka Kotori's stupid ideas will only harm Itsuka Shido. Dustless still remembered that in the original work, Itsuka Kotori and her subordinates often came up with all kinds of bad ideas to trick Itsuka Shido. If Shido wasn't smart enough, he would have been killed by Yusuke Toka. Shido, listen to me. Itsuki Kotori pulled Shido's arm and said in a serious tone, you will go on a date with the princess later. Elves aren't bad people. You should make friends with her and try your best to enlighten her. Make her like this world. Itsuka Shido's mouth twitched, and he asked in a gloomy tone, me? Go on a date with her. Are you sure you won't be killed by the princess? Of course not. Itsuki Kotori popped a lollipop into her mouth and smiled proudly. After detailed analysis, there is a 30% chance that, princess, will be angry, but she will definitely not kill you. Princess is not the kind of person who would kill innocent people. She accidentally caused the space tremor, and you have an honest face. Kotori gave Shido a thumbs up and told him not to worry. Honest man's face. Shido touched his face and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Kotori was looking down on him. What are you waiting for? Kotori kicked the cowardly Itsuka Shido and scolded, we just got the exact data from Ratatoskr. Princess is in a good mood right now. If AST is going to attack us later, you will definitely be killed if you provoke her. What Itsuki Kotori didn't know was that Dustless had done something out of the ordinary, and it had angered Toka, who was in a relatively stable mood. It was not that Dustless was deliberately trapping Ido Shirdao. Everyone had a limit to their tolerance. P.S. 3,000 fresh flowers plus more chapters, 3,000 rewards plus more chapters, 1,000 comments plus more chapters, 500 automatic subscriptions plus more chapters. Chapter 2076. Boom. 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 In the boundless sky, a raging wave flashed. Ha! Such a huge commotion was like a shooting star in the night sky. It was too eye-catching, and Night Sword God Toka looked over. Fierce Slayer. She waved her hand, and Night Sword God Toka slashed down with her blade. Whoosh! 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 It was as if even the air had been sliced apart, and a clear crack appeared in the vast void. Boom! 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 Fierce Slayer's sharp edge collided with the incoming slash, causing the boundless sky to tremble. Buzz! 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 The deathly silent void let out a series of extremely human-like wails. If one looked up at the sky, they would be surprised to find that the lazy white clouds had all been swept away. Boom! Boom! The two equally powerful moves collided violently. Immediately after, an endless shockwave swept out. Yi Dao Shintoxiang, who was caught off guard, was violently attacked. Whoosh! 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 Shido looked up at the shadow in the sky and saw Toka's face almost freeze. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked back at Kotori, who was hiding in the dark, and sighed helplessly. Whoosh! 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 Going on a date with such a monster. Whoosh! 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 You've got guts. Night Sword God raised his sword again and looked at Itoka Shido coldly. It was worth mentioning that the person who had attacked Night Sword God Toxiang had nothing to do with Itoka Shido. It was Dushless. As for why he suppressed Night Blade God 10 Incense, the reason was even simpler. Dustless was not the kind of person who would remain silent after being slapped in the face, regardless of who it was. The strength of the elves seems to be not bad. Looking up at the aftermath of the sky that had not completely dissipated, Dustless nodded secretly. It seemed that the person in the ghoul's world he had encountered before was much stronger. This is going to be a good show. Dustless had a gloating smile on his face as he stared at the petite figure in the void. The words on Toka's face were almost engraved with the words, "I am very unhappy." How dare Itsuka Shido approach her so recklessly? He didn't know how to spell the word death. Swish! Swish! Fierce Killer Duke abruptly swung down, and an incomparably biting cold light fell beside Itoka Shido. Boom boom boom. The ground on the right side of his feet suddenly exploded, and a horrifying hole was created. The ground was shaking, and Itoka Shido's body couldn't continue to maintain balance. Plop! Itoka Shido was careless and fell to the ground. This is bad. Seeing such a scene, Itsuka Kotori couldn't help but regret. Letting Shido, a human, touch the elves on Wrath's head, wasn't this asking for trouble? Why did you suddenly attack me? Itoka Shido, who fell down, was confused. Chapter 2077. There was no doubt about the coldness of the elves. Not every elf was as easy to talk to and communicate with as Dustless. For example, the current Night Blade God 10 Fragrances had a sense of rejection towards the outside world, including humans and other creatures, and even grass and trees. Especially when Dustless attacked the Night Blade God 10 Fragrances just now. She even suffered a great loss, causing this young girl to be in a very bad mood. Therefore, she held a serious hostile attitude towards everything in the human world. Tell me, why did you attack me? Toka demanded coldly. She was the complete opposite of the naughty girl she would be in the future. The girl was beautiful, but the coldness she exuded was enough to make one's scalp numb. Gulp. Itsuka Shido, who was locked onto by the murderous aura, was scared witless. His body twitched slightly as he looked into Toka's cold eyes. His heart was boiling. Of course, he was scared. Anyone would be scared when facing death. After all, Itsuka Shido was a normal human. He didn't have the destructive power of the elves. Killing Itsuka Shido was a piece of cake for her. What should I do? on the other side, Itsuka Kotori's brain cells sped up. She had been secretly observing Itsuka Shido's movements. Ever since she noticed Toka Shido's mood plummeting, she became moody. Her heart was in her throat. After all, Itsuka Shido was her brother. Ah! Looks like it took a lot of effort. She's just a little girl. A lazy voice came from the side. It was like a light breeze or a miraculous elixir. Itsuka Kotori's anxiety was instantly quenched. Hurry up and help me save Shido. Itsuka Kotori was anxious. She even sounded like she was begging for help. How? Dustless glanced at Itsuka Kotori and asked coldly, "You want me to go on a date with a little girl? That's child's play. Why can't you go on a date with a little girl?" Itsuka Kotori was pissed off. She looked at Dustless angrily and said, "Are you an old man who's a few hundred years old? Do you feel awkward talking to a little girl?" "That's right, it's indeed awkward, unless that little girl asks me out." After taking a look, Dustless nodded and admitted it. He said calmly, "You want me to take the initiative to go on a date with a girl? Perhaps it would be more realistic for you to kill me." "You." Hearing this, Itsuka Kotori stomped her feet angrily. She stared at the stubborn Dustless and couldn't help but think of other countermeasures. Oh, right, Itsuka Kotori's eyes lit up, and a plan came to her mind. She smiled at Dustless and said, "I took you in, bought you food, and even took you shopping. Even if I didn't do anything, I still did my best. You should do me a favor and thank me, right?" Dustless frowned and waved his hand. "Forget it, what you said makes sense. I'll help you this time, but only this time. That's more like it." Chapter 2078. Staring at the cold face of Dustless, Itsuka Shido's lips twitched a few times. He wanted to continue to thank him, but for some reason, his throat felt as if it was stuffed with bones, making it difficult for him to speak. Dustless radiated a cold aura, as if he was not from this world. Itsuka Shido felt that it was difficult to communicate with him, just like how a human could never communicate with an eagle soaring in the sky. There was a huge gap between them. "Were you the one who ambushed me?" Night Sword God Toka's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, and a dangerous light flickered in her eyes. The current Night Sword God Toka had not been enlightened by Itsuka Shido, so her personality was still very violent. If there was a disagreement, or if there was a suspect, she would not hesitate to kill the other party. Of course, this was not Night Sword God Toka's fault. After all, she had been hunted by AST before, and she had also been hated by humans. She had even been mercilessly hunted down by humans. It was normal for her to hate humans and reject this world. "Ambush you." Hearing this, Dustless's eyes suddenly became playful. He stared at Night Sword God Toka for a while, and his eyes were as clear as a microscope. He did not let go of any flaw in Night Sword God Toka. "What are you looking at?" Night Sword God Toka's pretty face changed slightly, and her tone was very unpleasant. Being stared at by Dustless made her feel extremely uncomfortable, especially with that aggressive gaze. It made Night Sword God Toka feel like she was stripped naked, and her naked body was exposed to Dustless's eyes. In short, Night Sword God Toka felt that her spirit had been violated by Dustless. "Ambush you. I just think it's too funny. You know, the moment you opened your mouth, I could have killed you 1,000 times." Dustless spoke frankly, and his words were filled with deep disdain and arrogance. "What did you say?" Hearing this, Night Sword God Toka's pretty face was filled with hostility. She looked at Dustless with hostility, and shook Night Sword God Toka. "If you can try. You asked for it." As soon as his voice fell, countless photons floated out of Dustless's body and rushed forward. So fast. Night Sword God 10 Fragrance's pupils shrank as he watched the photon disappear in an instant. He subconsciously swung Fierce Slayer at the flash, and a huge cold light pierced through Dustless's body. Poochie! The saber's momentum was very strong. The attacking light exploded like a puddle of water, scattering everywhere. Is that all? Nightblade God 10 Fragrance frowned slightly. She sensed that Dustless's aura had completely disappeared. Her small lips curled up slightly as she mumbled, as expected, people who like to spout nonsense are pitifully weak. He shouldn't have died so easily, right? Itsuki Kotori clenched her fists when she realized that Dustless had disappeared. Buzz buzz buzz. There was a strange ripple in the void, and then the collapsed photons gathered again, quietly gathering behind the Nightblade God's back like ghosts. Little girl, you're too arrogant, Dustless's indifferent tone startled Nightblade God 10 Incense. He quickly turned around and saw Dustless looking back at him. Damn it! Isn't he dead? Isn't he the one I just hit? Nightblade God 10 Fragrance widened her eyes and looked at Dustless as if she had seen a ghost. Shoo shoo shoo. At the same time, Dustless swung his saber, and a deadly light came at him. Nightblade God 10 Fragrance sensed the danger and quickly backed off. This was the first time she felt such a strange and deadly pressure, death. As expected, using violence to curb violence, Itsuki Kotori was stunned when she saw Dustless had forced the powerful elf to back off. To be honest, she and Murasame Rain didn't sense the energy wave that belonged to the elf from Dustless's body. In other words, Dustless was just a dangerous human. However, a human from the Confucian school was able to force the elf to back off, and he was even a powerful being like Nightblade God 10 Fragrance. Itsuki Kotori was stunned. Shoo shoo shoo. Dustless's heavenly sword of gathering clouds suddenly released a huge golden sword pressure. Puff! Everything that came into contact with the golden light was easily crushed like paper. Boom boom boom. The terrifying attack was like the angry roar of the heavens. In the end, it turned into a huge golden light that crushed toward the Nightblade God Toxiang with a monstrous aura. Gulp. To be honest, this was the first time Nightblade God 10 Fragrance saw such a powerful attack. She stood still and was stunned. Damn it. I can only try. Looking at Dustless with a gloomy gaze, Nightblade God 10 Fragrance's messy hair was covered in bean-sized tears. He tightly gripped his great sword, Fierce Slayer, with both hands, bursting with a tremendous aura, as if he was going to fight to the death. Buzz buzz buzz, the thick light gathered on the sword and slowly became bigger. The tip of the sword even released a burst of impact that even the oxygen in the atmosphere was bounced away. Crack crack crack. Even the surface of the ground around them began to crack, revealing a series of ghastly fissures. How rare! Dustless naturally noticed the series of problems that Nightblade God 10 Fragrance caused. He couldn't help but nod in surprise with a hint of admiration on his face. Although Nightblade God 10 Fragrance was young, his strength was not bad. He had traveled through so many worlds. Frankly speaking, this Nightblade God 10 Fragrance in front of him was not bad. He was only 16 years old. P.S. 3,000 flowers plus updates, 3,000 rewards plus updates, 1,000 comments plus updates, 500 automatic subscriptions plus updates. Chapter 2079. Shoo shoo shoo. The attack that Night Sword God Toka had been preparing for was unleashed, and the light flashed toward Chin Fan. Boom boom boom. As the two slashes clashed, an extremely violent shock wave immediately erupted. The surrounding space and the vast land were all fatally affected, collapsing one after another. A sandstorm swept up in the vast sky. It was a dozen meters tall, and the blue sky was filled with sand and dust. Bang bang bang. The air exploded, and the shock waves from the explosion forced everyone to step back. Damn it. Itsuki Kotori spat. She was also affected by the shock wave, and her mouth was full of sand. So violence can really be used against violence. Dating is so weak. Itsuki Kotori stared at Dustless in disbelief. She stared at Dustless with her cute little face. In contrast to Nightblade God, who looked as if he was about to face a great enemy, Dustless was as calm as a breeze. Anyone could tell who was stronger and who was weaker. I am not as strong as him. After the first clash, Night Sword God Toka tensed up. Although the two attacks had cancelled each other out, he was at a disadvantage in terms of scale and power. But, it's almost done. Night Sword God Toka looked at the fierce killer in his hand with a smile on his face. He stuck out his tongue and regained his confidence. Is the last sword almost done? At this moment, Wu Chen's expectant voice suddenly came, and his bored cheeks were aroused a little interest. You know my attack. Hearing this, Night Sword God Toka widened his eyes in shock. He didn't expect this skinny kid to see through his trump card before he could even use it. Just as you thought, I do know. Dustless's eyes were as clear as water. He said without hiding anything, don't waste my time. Hurry up and use your last attack. Isn't this the reason why you are stalling for time? He glanced at the great sword in Night Sword God Toka's hand. It was completely different from before. Not to mention the size of the sword, it was now only 10 meters long. A 10-meter long sword. It looks scary, but I don't know how powerful it is. Dustless rubbed his chin as he looked at Night Sword God Toka in a different light. The 10-meter long great sword shone brightly. Even though he hadn't unsheathed the sword yet, Dustless could feel that he had been locked onto by a terrifying existence. He even felt a slight pain on his skin. Not bad. Wu Qin showed a rare smile and gave a provocative look to the Nightblade God 10 fragrance. Quickly cut your fire stick over, let me see what's different about it. Night Sword. Don't underestimate me. Hearing this, Nightblade Goddess Toxiang was so angry that the veins on her forehead bulged. She almost lost her grip on the last sword. Night Sword. Have you ever seen such a powerful and domineering fire stick? Preposterous. Go to hell. Enraged, Nightblade God Toxiang slashed out with all his might with his dangerous divine sword. Dustless was powerful, but his mouth was even worse. Pfft. A massive slash shot out, tearing the surface of the earth to shreds the moment it was unleashed. The slash was filled with an ominous killing intent that could destroy all things. The sword was just like its name, the final sword. Everything that came into contact with it would reveal their final side before they all collapsed. But that wasn't the scariest part. The slash has become bigger. Wu Chen's pupils shrank. The huge slash seemed to have taken steroids. It kept getting stronger and stronger, destroying everything in its path. Finally, it turned into a huge solid blade that was dozens of meters long, just like the anger of heaven. Kid, you're dead for sure now. Nightblade God 10 fragrances beamed from ear to ear. Seeing Wu Chen's cautious expression, she immediately smiled proudly. Oh no. Itsuki Kotori was sweating profusely. She stared at Wu Chen as if she could empathize with him. Her petite body was trembling, and her beautiful eyes were filled with fear. The power of Night Sword God Toka's attack was beyond Itsuki Kotori's expectation. It's not good to be so violent at such a young age, Wu Chen said in a low voice. His thumb-length short black hair was blown to one side by the biting cold sword pressure. The sudden attack was about to tear him apart. Dustless didn't panic in the face of such a brutal attack. His face was as calm as a rock. He raised his right hand. On the tip of his right thumb, a golden ball of light appeared. It was about the size of a fist. It looked ordinary and did not have the slightest lethality. It was just like an ordinary light bulb. It was not elegant at all. Caw caw caw. However, the moment the ball of light appeared, the space around it started to twist and turn into a giant whirlpool as if it was controlled by some mysterious power. At the center of the twisted space was the ball of light that could destroy the world. What the hell is going on? Itsuka Kotori murmured. She thought Night Sword God Toka was already powerful enough, but after seeing the ball of light in Dustless's hand, she felt like her world had been turned upside down. Sprites or whatever, compared to Dustless, were too weak. Wang Su's flash. Dustless flicked his finger and released the ball of light. Kacha! The sharp sound of the air being torn apart continued to resound. Wang Su's flash flew out in a straight line. The space behind it collapsed and the void was completely annihilated, forming a black and terrifying gully. P.S. 3,000 fresh flowers plus more chapters, 3,000 rewards plus more chapters, 1,000 comments plus more chapters, 500 automatic subscriptions plus more chapters. Chapter 2080. Boom boom boom. A fierce explosion swept across the area, and the shockwaves shattered the sky. When the shockwaves came into contact with the Night Sword God Toxiang, the latter felt powerless as if she had met her natural enemy. The high temperature and shockwaves from the void flash vaporized her instantly. Crack crack crack. Not only that, even the sky was shattered. The shockwaves from the void flash destroyed layers of space, twisting and shattering it. Boom boom boom. Looking up, a black hole of an extremely exaggerated scale was torn out in the sky where Dustless was. It was dark and boundless. The black hole seemed to be connected to the abyss of the universe, and it was filled with a piercing chill. How boring. Dustless shook his head, and a look of disappointment appeared on his face. Night Sword God Toxiang could not even arouse his interest. I lost. Night Sword God Toxiang dropped to her knees and looked at the crack in the sky. Her eyes were dark and empty. This was the first time she had suffered such a crushing defeat. Dustless had almost crushed her to the point where she could not even fight back. She turned her eyes and looked into Dustless's indifferent eyes. Night Sword God Toxiang said to herself in a daze, I lost, will I be killed? Her calm eyes scanned the world around her. For some reason, a hint of reluctance flashed through Yedaoshin Toxiang's eyes. No one was willing to die. Every creature was infatuated with this colorful world, including Wu Qin. He had lived for hundreds of years and had never had the concept of death in his mind. If he could live, no one was willing to die. She slowly walked over and stared at the Night Blade God 10 Incense. Wu Qin didn't say anything and just looked at her quietly. Are you here to kill me? Night Sword God Toxiang said in a low voice. Kill an elf. At this moment, an extremely astonished voice suddenly sounded, followed by a gust of wind that blocked Night Blade God 10 Incense's path. I will not allow it. The black shadow stopped, revealing a young body. Although he was young, his eyes were like torches, shining brightly. There was not the slightest bit of wavering or fear. Itsuka Kotori, Dustless glanced at the girl with the red ponytail and said calmly, I never said I was going to kill her. This matter has nothing to do with me. Is that so? Hearing this, Itsuka Kotori smiled and said, that's good. This girl will be ours from now on. Not us, but mine. Dustless waved his hand and interrupted Itsuka Kotori. He then looked at Toka and said, I don't like to do things that don't benefit me. You don't seem to have anything to compensate me. At this point, Dustless lowered his voice and said flatly, as the saying goes, a gambling debt must be paid with your body. From now on, you are mine. Who wants to be your slave? No way. It was rare that Toka and Itsuka Kotori were on the same side. Chapter 2081. Itsuka Shido stared at Dustless in a daze. His eyes were fixed on Dustless, and he could not hide the shock in his eyes. What kind of freak is this guy? Everyone would feel lost when faced with something that defied the laws of physics, and Itsuka Shido was no exception. His eyes were filled with confusion. The strength that Dustless displayed deeply shocked Ido Shido. He finally realized how insignificant he was. He was simply a small fry that couldn't withstand a single blow. Of course, it was normal to feel this way. After all, the gap between them was too big. One was an ordinary human, and the other was a demon king who had destroyed many worlds. But then again, if we leave her at home, someone will find out sooner or later. Itsuka Kotori's eyes flashed with a hint of worry. Wuchen only used his own strength to suppress Toka Toka, he did not seal her power. If that was the case, the people from AST would find out sooner or later. Fairies could radiate psychic waves, and it was only a matter of time before they found out. So what if we are found out? Dustless looked at Itsuka Kotori and said calmly, "We will deal with whatever comes our way. Don't worry." In fact, AST was already scared of Dustless, and they were afraid that they would not be able to escape. 3 days later, in the morning breeze was strong, and the sun was shining brightly. Gulu gulu. In Itsuka Kotori's house, Toka Toka was gobbling up all the food on the table. She even ate Dustless and Kotori's portions. Dustless, who just came out of the bedroom, was speechless. He looked at Toka Toka, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He already knew that Toka Toka was a super glutton, and now he knew that she lived up to her reputation. Sigh, Itsuka Kotori also sighed and said, "I plan to send Toka to school to learn about human society. I want her to fall in love with this world." If he wanted to rope someone in, he would first have to make her agree with this world. To put it simply, he had to brainwash her. "I object. I reject your conditions." Wuchen rejected Itsuka Kotori's offer without hesitation. He said coldly, "You want to send her to school? The spiritual waves radiating from her body will be recognized sooner or later. She's just like a lamb entering a tiger's den. How foolish." Anne. Dustless sat lazily on the sofa and snapped his fingers. 10 incense. I got it. Hearing Dustless's call, Toxiang immediately put down the food in her hand and ran over. She circled behind Dustless and massaged Dustless's shoulders. Her slender hand circled around Dustless's neck and gently kneaded it. Her technique was light and unique. Not bad. Dustless closed his eyes and nodded, occasionally revealing a satisfied smile. He seemed to be enjoying the service of the Night Blade God. "You bastard," Itsuka Kotori's mouth twitched when she saw this. She looked at the obedient Night Blade God and couldn't help but complain. "Can't you just beat him up? Show him your power as an elf." "This servant is so obedient." Dustless turned his head and looked at the Night Blade God who was massaging his shoulders. He was quite satisfied. The Night Blade God 10 Fragrances was extremely obedient. Moreover, she didn't have a bad temper. As long as she was given delicious food, she would immediately become obedient to Wuchen. Wouldn't it be crazy to send such a good servant to school? Anyway, I don't want Toka to go to school. Dustless picked up the snacks on the sofa and repeated. "Humph, you're just afraid that no one will serve you if Toka leaves." Itsuka Kotori put her hands on her hips and looked at Dustless with dissatisfaction. This guy actually got an elf to massage his shoulders. He was too extravagant. "Think what you want." Dustless ignored Itsuka Kotori's pestering and said lazily. "Girl, don't forget that I am the one who subdued her with my strength. You have no right to interfere. You want to burn the bridge after crossing the river." Itsuka Kotori stared at Dustless angrily. Her tone was full of dissatisfaction. "Forget it, Commander. There is nothing wrong with this." Seeing that Dustless wasn't giving in, Murasame Rain had to persuade him. It would be bad if Toka causes trouble in school. Leaving Nightblade God Toka at home might be boring, but at least Dustless would keep an eye on her. Nothing serious would happen. The weather looks good. Let's go out and have some fun. Dustless stretched his body and looked up at the bright sunlight outside the window. A faint smile appeared on his face. It wasn't easy to come to a new world, so it was only right for him to go out and have some fun. Anyone would feel bored even if they stayed at home. Go out and have some fun. Itsuka Kotori and Murasame Rain's eyes lit up when they heard this. Don't get the wrong idea. This is not a date. Besides, I don't have the ability to seal elves like Itsuka Shido. Your plan is just nonsense. When Wu-chin saw their joyful faces, he immediately understood that they had misunderstood. He couldn't help but shake his head. But even so, bringing Nightblade God Toka out to have some fun wasn't a bad idea. Dustless had to go out anyway, so it was safer to leave her alone at home. Who knows what kind of trouble she might cause. P.S. 3,000 fresh flowers plus more chapters, 3,000 rewards plus more chapters, 1,000 comments plus more chapters, 500 automatic subscriptions plus more chapters. Chapter 2082. After all, he still had to stay in this world for a while, and he couldn't stay at home for a long time, so he had to go out for a walk. This guy is still not cooperating at all. Kotori Five Rivers frowned, and her delicate little face was particularly ugly. Commander, it's useless even if Dustless cooperates. Murasame Rain took a sip of coffee and looked at Dustless and explained, even if Dustless can increase the favorability of the elves, it's useless. If it's Shido, it's fine. As for Dustless, it's a pity. I've investigated his body countless times. He doesn't have Shido's ability to seal the elves. That's true. Hearing this, Itsuka Kotori calmed down and muttered to herself, seems like I still need to rely on Shido. The dialogue between Murasame Rain and Itsuka Koto was very subtle and weak. Others could only see the lips biting, but Wu-chin was clear about it, and he even heard it all without missing a word. I don't have the ability. What a joke. Wu-chin smiled but didn't say anything. He closed his eyes and laughed in his heart. It's undeniable that I don't have the magical ability to seal energy like Itsuka Shido, but I have the system. Thinking of this, Wu-chin grinned. So many years had passed and he hadn't used the system during this period. The reason was that his strength had reached such a level that the presence of the system was almost negligible. In most cases, the function of the system was limited to transmigration. Dustless's system's ability was also very simple. In the system, he could train at will. As long as he killed the opponent, he could obtain all of the opponent's abilities. Otherwise, if he couldn't defeat the opponent, he would die. That kid Shido, he looked up and glanced at the picture frame on the wall. The brother and sister in the picture were Itsuka Kotori and Itsuka Shido. It's too easy to kill you. Dustless shook his head. Although Shido Itsuka was quite capable, his combat prowess was nothing to be proud of. If Dustless Itsuka killed him in the system, he would be able to obtain all of his abilities, such as the special ability to seal spirits. Of course, the Ido Shido in the system had nothing to do with the Ido Shido in this world. The Ido Shido was created by the system consciousness, Ling Air. Even if it was killed, it had nothing to do with the Ido Shido in this world. There's nothing in this world that I can't get. Lazily sitting on the sofa, Dustless immersed himself in the system world and began to practice Ido Shido. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, half an hour had passed. During this time, Dustless had also completed his training. He had successfully killed Shido Itoka in the system and obtained his unique ability to seal the power of spirits. The reason why it was so fast was because Shido's strength was too weak. He was weak in the real world, and he was also weak in the system world and the real world. Chapter 2083. Dustless was so invincible. Any ability of the enemy, as long as he wanted, could be obtained instantly. But the premise was that he must defeat the enemy in the system until he killed the enemy. Only then could he obtain the enemy's ability. In this case, Itsuki Kotori's gem eyes were shining. She glanced at Murasame Rain and asked eagerly, "How much is the favorability of 10 fragrances for Wuchin?" Favorability toward dustless. Murasame Rain lowered her head and pondered for a moment, and finally said, "About 70%. At the beginning, Toka's favorability toward dustless was close to 0, and even reached a negative level. But, then, Murasame Rain's voice was full of helplessness, and she smiled bitterly. The temptation of food is always invincible. Toka followed dustless for a few days and ate a few days of delicious food, so her favorability toward him also skyrocketed. Is that so? I can only say that dustless is lucky. Itsuki Kotori also sighed, and then she waved her hand and said, "It seems that we don't need to do anything, dustless is enough to take care of Toka." Seems like it. On the other side, dustless and Toka were walking together. "Look, dustless, I want to eat that bread. Is this a hot dog? Give me 10 servings. I want to eat dessert." On the bustling street, there were all kinds of dazzling food on both sides. The fragrance was overflowing. Even if Wuchin had no appetite, he would feel hungry when he smelled the tempting fragrance, not to mention the big foodie Night Sword God 10 fragrance. Fortunately, Itsuki Kotori gave dustless a lot of yen before they went out, so he didn't have to worry about money. This tastes really good. On the bench in the park, dustless and Toka sat together, both of them holding ice cream in their hands. And Toka was holding a plastic bag full of food. "Yes, not bad, really not bad. I want to come out and play again next time." Yi Saber God Juxiang was overjoyed. Her delicate little face revealed a happy smile. She was very happy. Seriously. Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry after seeing this scene. As the saying goes, contentment brings joy. Just some food was enough to make the dark saber god so happy that he couldn't tell north from south. An extremely unfamiliar voice suddenly sounded from behind. It was soft and gentle, making people unable to help but want to protect her. "You are," Dustless subconsciously turned around to look, and his eyes were a little dazed. A cute face popped out from the dense grass. Her skin was as white as snow and her long blue hair gave people the impression that she was very beautiful. Her bright eyes were dotted with tears. Her pitiful appearance and timid tone made people want to protect her. "Is this the 4 bonsai?" Dustless muttered to himself in astonishment. His eyes widened. He did not expect to encounter Yoshino here. But what's with this outfit? Chapter 2084. Is she really an elf? Their timid eyes stared straight at the night blade god Toxiang. Perhaps because they were of the same species and could understand each other, the 4 elements felt a sense of belonging to the night blade god Toxiang. Night blade god 10 fragrances' eyes also glowed with a sense of belonging to the same kind, a feeling of mutual appreciation. Looking at Dustless's eyes, Janssen gritted his teeth and said, "Can you help me find a white doll?" Doll? Wuchin frowned. Only then did he remember that there was a doll in the 4 elements called the 4 Kainai. "You lost it when AST was chasing you?" Night Sword God Toka asked angrily. "Those bastards just won't go away. They are nothing compared to Kotori." "Of course they are." Wuchin was non-committal about this. Then, he added, "But those 2 organizations aren't good people." "Are you saying that Kotori is not a good person?" Toka was stunned and looked at Dustless in surprise. No, Dustless shook his head and said softly, "I'm saying that the organizations behind them are not good people. No matter what kind of group they are, as long as they are related to organizations, there is no such thing as a clean organization." Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At the same time, a sharp sound came from the sky. Mysterious falling objects covered in flames were whizzing toward them. There were so many of them that it was dazzling. That is. Dustless's eyes opened slightly, and the mysterious objects a few hundred meters away suddenly became very clear. Are those missiles? Those AST members are really boring. Dustless sighed, then he frowned and said, no wonder they have to seal the power of the elves, otherwise the psychic waves emitted from their bodies would be really troublesome. Not sealing the power of the elves means that they will emit psychic waves at any time, which can be easily detected by AST. Disappear. Dustless's eyes flashed with a black luster, his pupils focused on the large number of missiles, then he blinked slightly. Amaterasu. In an instant, the oncoming missiles were engulfed by the black demonic flames. The sky was filled with black flames, and the missiles formed a black wall of flames in the direction they were heading. Boom, boom, boom. After a while, the void exploded, and the sky was filled with flames. The black smoke was more than 10 meters high, and a large cluster of flames connected together. It was quite a spectacular sight. Thank you. Janssen stood up and bowed to Dustless very seriously. Perhaps because of her young age, Janssen was quite timid in everything she did, and her shining eyes contained some fear. Don't be so polite. Wuchen smiled and rubbed Sinai's hair. He comforted her gently, anyway, AST will arrest my servant even if you don't exist. Your servant? Sinai looked at Nightblade God 10 Incense with a strange look. He already knew who he was talking about. Hey, who's your servant? I'm not. Hearing this, Toka immediately looked at Dustless with dissatisfaction, and said seriously, I'm not your servant, I'm just temporarily staying in your house, no, Kotori's house temporarily. Toka was very unwilling to resist. Dustless said that she was his servant in front of Janssen, and she felt embarrassed, so of course she had to refute this guy. At this time, Janssen tugged at Dustless's sleeve, and said softly, I want to be your servant too, can you help me find Janssen? Seriously, this guy's luck is too good. Itsuka Kotori, who was secretly observing, was speechless. She was shocked to find that just because Dustless had destroyed the missile attack and helped the 4 elementals, her favorability towards Dustless had skyrocketed. Janssen's heart is weak, and she's just a child, so it's easy for her to rely on others. Rain Murasame was quite clear, and it was normal for her to have a favorable impression of someone who saved her. It was easy for a child to rely on others, especially a helpless child. What's the favorability of this elf team Chin now? Kotori asked curiously as she twitched the lollipop in her mouth. Around 60%. Rain Murasame nodded, and then said seriously, if Dustless can really help her find her lost doll, her favorability would at least reach 80%, or even 90%. Really? Kotori was stunned, and then she waved her hand and said, we seem to be superfluous to Dustless. He doesn't seem to be good at dating, but he can always inadvertently win the favorability of the other party. Some things are just so magical. Rain Murasame also said with emotion, and it could only be said that it was fate. Damn it, why is that kid still haunting us? Last time when we carried out the mission to kill the princess, we also encountered this unlucky guy. As expected, the AST members who were rushing over noticed Dustless. Their expressions changed drastically, especially Daybreak Prairie Fire and Kite One Origami. Their delicate faces froze one after another. Captain, do we still need to continue the mission? Toby Origami asked with a rare lack of confidence. Liaozi's mouth twitched a few times, and then she said helplessly, the mission ends here. When we go back, we will say that the enemy escaped. P.S. 3,000 flowers plus updates, 3,000 rewards plus updates, 1,000 comments plus updates, 500 automatic subscriptions plus updates. Chapter 2085. The enemy ran away. The members of AST rolled their eyes when they heard this. The enemy was so close, yet she claimed that Dustless and the others ran away. Wasn't she lying through her teeth? However, even so, the other members of AST remained silent. It was obvious that they agreed with Blazing Sun's approach. Very well. When we return, report according to what I said. You guys discuss it and don't say anything wrong. Blazing Sun heaved a sigh of relief. She felt that the mountain hanging on her back had disappeared without a trace. It was not that Blazing Sun was afraid of Dustless, but the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. It was as simple as a cat toying with a mouse. The last time they captured the princess, Night Sword God Toka, they were played by Dustless. But he's really strange. Toichi Origami stared at Dustless, her pupils dilated slightly. Where did this guy come from? I've never detected psychic waves, but the density of the two elves beside him is extremely high. This, Blazing Sun's expression was also very strange. She could not help but mutter, no psychic waves. Could it be that we were wrong from the beginning? Is he a human? But, since when were humans so powerful? Since when were humans able to roam the sky without the help of external forces? Since when were weak humans able to defeat the fully equipped AST? It was reasonable to say that Dustless was not an elf. By the way, I have a new mission to assign. Blazing Sun's eyes flashed. Blazing Sun's gaze swept across the members of AST one by one. Seeing the cowering eyes of her team members, she could not help but sigh in disappointment. It's difficult to achieve great things. Blazing Sun looked up at the sky and sighed. Blazing Sun's gaze turned to Toichi Origami, who had a calm expression. She then said with satisfaction, Origami. That kid, you'll be in charge of monitoring him from now on. Me? When Yui Origami heard this, her fair face showed a rare emotional fluctuation. She pouted her sandalwood lips. Thinking of Wuchen's character, she had a sad feeling that she wanted to cry but had no tears. Itsuka Kotori's home. Even though Kotori had expected some progress in the relationship between Dustless and Dustless, she didn't expect Dustless to bring her back. You didn't even ask for my permission to bring her back. Do you really think of Wuhi's family as your own? Itsuka Kotori always had a lollipop in her mouth. With her arms akimbo, she stared at Dustless who was sleeping on the sofa. This guy was really too arrogant. He brought a person back and didn't even greet him, the owner. It was simply outrageous. This entire planet is mine. Wuchen stretched and casually said, not to mention your family. Wait until you can defeat me one day, then you can come and fight against me. The strong will only use their fists to talk, and the weak will only talk arrogantly. What an unreasonable guy. Chapter 2086. How boring. Dustless shook his head. He laughed at AST's actions. In reality, he was just living the life of an ordinary person. He did not do anything out of the ordinary. Spying on them was pointless. If one day Dustless was annoyed, he could just kill them. It was like sending a lamb to a tiger's den. Let's get along peacefully in the future. Yuichi Origami left a sentence, then turned around and left, quite at ease. Live in peace with you around. Itsuka Kotori snorted disapprovingly, treating Tabichi Origami's words as a joke. She then muttered to herself, with AST around, can this world be peaceful? The organizations behind you are all the same. Dustless looked at Itsuka Kotori and continued to drink his tea. There was no such thing as a clean organization. Bang! Itsuka Kotori slammed the door in annoyance. Those locusts from AST just won't go away. About what you said yesterday, I've changed my mind. Itsuka Kotori was stunned when she heard Dustless's cold voice. She looked at him blankly. She did not know what this guy was trying to do. About what happened yesterday. Itsuka Kotori frowned. She lowered her head and thought about what they talked about yesterday. Her eyes lit up and she said in surprise, "You're really going to go to school in Toka?" Itsuka Kotori had always wanted Toka to join the school. She hoped that she would be able to integrate into human society and learn about human culture so that everyone could live in peace. Unfortunately, Dustless did not agree, so the matter was left unsettled. Until now, when Dustless suddenly spoke, Itsuka Kotori was surprised. "I'm not as stubborn as you think." Wuchen looked at Itsuka Kotori seriously, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Then, he stated his condition. "However, I have to join that school." "You want to be a student too?" Itsuka Kotori's face froze. She looked at Dustless suspiciously. She felt that this guy was up to something. "No, forget about being a student. I'd rather be a teacher." Dustless shook his head. Forget about being a student. He was already a few hundred years old. It would be ridiculous for him to be a student. No one was qualified to teach him. The reason why Dustless chose to become a teacher was actually because he had his own goals. Since he had promised to help the four elements find the lost four kunai, he would definitely complete it. At that time, the four kunai were being hunted down by AST, and they were lost in the process. It was likely that the four kunai was in the hands of AST members. Since Kaichi Origami and Dustless were in the same school, it was natural for Dustless to contact her. 3 days later, in the morning, Dustless easily got a job as a physical education teacher. As for other subjects, Dustless was not suitable for it, nor was he interested in it. The atmosphere of the school is really annoying. Entering the school again, Dustless didn't have any emotions. The only thing left was disgust. A centuries-old figure stepping into the school again was a really unpleasant feeling. "Look, who is that?" He seems to be walking towards the physical education teacher's office. Could it be the new physical education teacher? This time, the principal finally has a conscience. He finally found a handsome physical education teacher. The group of students stared at Dustless in astonishment. Some of them even showed an expression of infatuation, and there were quite a few of them. Dustless felt helpless. He couldn't help but sigh. Sometimes, being handsome was a sin. Hey. You're the new physical education teacher, right?" At this moment, a rather light voice suddenly sounded. It was very pleasant to the ears, as pleasant as the sound of nature. The seductive voice made people want to hurry up and strike up a conversation as if it was filled with magic. "Who is it?" Curious, Dustless looked back. He had heard too many pleasant voices. The only thing that surprised him was that this pleasant voice sounded familiar. "It's you." A graceful figure appeared in front of his eyes. An unexpected figure appeared in front of him. Dustless's pupils suddenly shrunk slightly, and a strong sense of disbelief flashed through his eyes. "Isn't this Tokasaki Kurumi? Why is she in this school now?" According to the development of the original work, it should be some time later. Dustless's face was full of puzzlement, and his brain power was somewhat overdrawn. "It seems that my arrival has caused a butterfly effect. Some things have changed." Dustless muttered, and at the same time, he glanced at the smiling girl. Her appearance was peerless, her temperament was bewitching, and her eyes were like spring water. Her every move exuded charm, and between her frown and smile, one's thoughts seemed to be controlled by her, and one could not help but follow her thoughts. What a living seductress! Dustless sighed in his heart. Even though he had a calm mind for many years, he could not help but be aroused. To be able to make a centuries-old monster like Dustless feel desire, it was enough to show how charming Tokasaki Kurumi was. Phew! After taking a deep breath, Dustless's heart calmed down, and his eyes regained some clarity. Then, under Dustless's puzzled gaze, Tokasaki Kurumi slightly bowed to him politely. I'm also a new transfer student. Teacher, please take care of me. My name is Tokasaki Kurumi, and I'm an elf. P.S. 3,000 flowers plus updates, 3,000 rewards plus updates, 1,000 comments plus updates, 500 automatic subscriptions plus updates. Chapter 2087. The only thing that surprised Dustless was that Tokasaki Kurumi actually took the initiative to approach him. Dustless didn't think that he was her target. This guy seems to want to fuse with Itsuka Shido. Staring at the smiling girl, Dustless frowned slightly. Her smile was like a spring breeze, making people want to open their hearts to her and confide in her. Not to mention being wary of her, it was a feeling of wanting to bow down to her. Tokasaki Kurumi's eyes narrowed into crescents. Her smile was sincere and polite. If Dustless wasn't a transmigrator, he might have been fooled by Tokasaki Kurumi. The girl's bright and gentle smile made it hard for people to doubt her. That's right. I'm your new physical education teacher. What can I do for you? Dustless's tone was indifferent. There was even a hint of rejection and disgust. As the saying goes, a weasel pays a visit to a chicken with bad intentions. Tokasaki Kurumi was exactly like that. She took the initiative to talk to Dustless for no good reason. Dustless couldn't even be polite to someone who had designs on him. What's with this guy's attitude? That's right. Don't tell me he's putting on an act for others. He's too pretentious. The surrounding students saw this scene and felt injustice for Tokasaki Kurumi. From their point of view, for such a cute girl to take the initiative to talk to Dustless, this guy's ancestors must have burned incense and prayed to the Bodhisattva for protection. The heavens must have given Dustless face. But now, his indifferent attitude made everyone jealous. This guy is too insensible. Isn't he just a little handsome? Why is he putting on airs? The surrounding students looked at Dustless unhappily and couldn't help but curse him. This guy actually dared to treat a gentle beauty like Tokasaki Kurumi coldly. He really deserved a beating. This bunch of idiots. Dustless was speechless when he saw everyone looking at him like he was an idiot. It would be fine if Tokasaki Kurumi was here to strike up a conversation, but it was clear that she had ill intentions. She was about to swallow him alive, yet he was still smiling at her so foolishly. Wasn't that an idiot? This guy, Tokasaki Kurumi, was also in a daze. To be honest, she was very confident in her appearance. When she took the initiative to talk to others, they would usually be overjoyed. Only Dustless was an exception. Staring at Dustless, Tokasaki Kurumi's interest was piqued. Sensei, may I know your name? Tokasaki Kurumi bowed slightly and maintained her gentle smile. Dustless glanced at her, nodded and said, My name is Dustless. I'll be the physical education teacher of this school from now on. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. Ouch! At this moment, Tokasaki Kurumi's face suddenly changed. Her rosy face instantly turned as white as snow. She looked extremely weak, as if she was sick. You're not feeling well. Chapter 2088. In fact, Tokasaki Kurumi didn't take the initiative to talk to Dustless. She had her own intentions. Before this, Tokasaki Kurumi had inquired about Itsuka Shido. Unfortunately, for some unknown reason, Itsuka Shido was kicked out of his home. As for the reason, the instigator was none other than Wu Qin. Tokasaki Kurumi had always been puzzled about the reason. Until today, she was still puzzled. Itsuka Shido was such an important person, yet he was kicked out of his home. She was curious about the reason behind it. I will see through your conspiracy sooner or later. Tokasaki Kurumi no longer hesitated and walked toward the school building. The farce came to an end. On the other side, Thank you, Mr. Principal. Take care, I won't see you out. In the empty school building, Dustless sent the principal off with a smile. He then turned around and stared at the beautiful girl with dark circles under her eyes. Pardon me for asking, but does it have anything to do with you that I'm a PE teacher? I say, aren't you guys overstepping your boundaries? Dustless looked at the silver-haired girl and asked curiously. Taking a closer look, this person's appearance was rather perfect, and her figure was not bad either. Her breasts were curvaceous, and her delicate white skin was tinged with red. Her pink lips were as fragrant as the fragrance of roses, making people unable to resist the urge to go up and take a bite. However, the only flaw was the dark circles under her eyes, which seriously affected her beauty. Rain, you can go back. There's nothing for you to do here. Also, tell Itsuka Kotori to mind her own business. Dustless waved his hand and impatiently ordered her to leave. He then said, the 4 elemental plushie might be in Tokichi origami in AST. I'll leave after I get it. However, Murasame Rain just smiled and didn't care. From now on, I'll be your assistant. Please give me your guidance. Little Chin. No, Dustless Mr. Dustless. Let's get along peacefully in the future. Murasame Rain looked at Dustless's eyes, and finally quickly changed her words. If she called Dustless Little Chin, she didn't know why, she always felt very strange. Even though Dustless looked young and immature, the vicissitudes of life in his eyes and his carefree attitude towards everything did not seem like something a youth should possess. Assistant. Dustless rolled his eyes and said snappily, do whatever you want. I've already asked you to go back. Don't complain to me if anything happens in the future. Then Wu Chin sat at his desk and flipped through today's class schedule. Coincidentally, he found that the next PE class was Atoka Shido's class. You're giving me a pillow when I'm sleepy. Maybe I can resign and go home after a day as a PE teacher. Dustless stretched out, and a few playful arcs appeared on his face. It's good to tease young people occasionally. Looking at the playground outside the window, Dustless said to himself. You're not that old. Murasame Rain didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dustless looked like he was only 18 or 19 years old. He was very young, but he spoke like he was young and mature. He gave people the feeling of a super old monster coming out of the coffin. By the way, it's worth mentioning that Toka also entered the school, and she is in the same class as Shido. Murasame Rain suddenly said. This should be arranged by Kotori and Itsuka, right? Frowning slightly, Dustless's tone was a bit low, and a strange color flashed on his cheeks. His bright eyes were flickering with thought-provoking light. You shouldn't be, as if discovering a new world. Murasame Rain looked at Dustless with a very shocked look. Suddenly she smiled and teased Dustless, you shouldn't be jealous of Shido and Toka being in the same class. Really, I thought you were a serious monk before. It turns out that you also have 7 emotions and 6 desires. Jealous? Wu Chen laughed involuntarily. What was there in this worthless world that was worthy of his jealousy? What was there that he couldn't get? Was there a need to be jealous of Shido? What was so special about him? Even if he had the unique ability to seal spirits, Dustless got it. Being jealous of Shido was completely empty. What I'm worried about is, walking to the window, Wu Chen looked at the rows of teaching buildings not far away and suddenly smiled. I want to tell you that the relationship between Toka and Itoka Shido is very bad. I just hope that Toka won't suddenly pull out a sword to kill Itoka Shido after seeing him. Murasame Rain was stunned by Dustless's answer. After thinking about it carefully, what Dustless said was not unreasonable. When Ido Shido attacked Toka for the first time, it angered him. If it wasn't for Dustless, Ido Shido would have been killed by Toka. In fact, it was just as Dustless had guessed. In the classroom on the other side, Toka had just met Itoka Shido, and the two instantly had sparks. Why are you here? The Night Sword God Toka glared at Itoka Shido with displeasure. When Itoka Shido started sweating, she said angrily, being with a loser like you is really bad luck. What kind of evil thing did Shido do? Itsuka Kodori, who was in charge of monitoring Toka, was speechless. She was shocked to find that before meeting Shido, Toka's good mood was around 80%, but after meeting Shido, it almost dropped to 0. Did I offend you? It's none of my business. Itoka Shido looked at the angry Night Sword God Toka with a sad face. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. He felt like he had been shot while lying down. He hadn't done anything to provoke this fierce girl. P.S. 3,000 flowers plus updates, 3,000 rewards plus updates, 1,000 comments plus updates, 500 automatic subscriptions plus updates. Chapter 2089. Go Shido wanted to cry but had no tears. He said that he really didn't provoke Yado Toho, but he didn't know why Toho was against him, which really made Go Shido angry. It seems that I was right, these two people are really difficult to get along. Dustless's eyes narrowed into a crescent moon, and the corners of his mouth raised gently, with a faint gloating smile on his face. Although the distance was quite far, for him who had Sharingan, this was not a big problem, it was just a small matter. It was worth mentioning that the development of the current world was not the world of the original work. The encounter between Go Shido and Yado Toho was completely ruined by Dustless, and the relationship between the two was extremely unpleasant. Of course, all of this was because of Wu Chen's mischief. They were originally a pair of immortal companions, yet they'd already become natural enemies that couldn't tolerate each other. All of this is because of you. Murasame Rain snorted discontentedly, and there was a rare trace of blame on her tired cheeks. Because of me. Hearing this, Dustless snorted and said, maybe it's because of me, but please don't forget, if it wasn't because of me, this city would have been destroyed by Yado Toho. That's right. Murasame Rain opened her mouth, and her throat seemed to be stuffed with a piece of bone, and it was difficult to continue to speak. She was speechless by Dustless's words. Dustless's words may be a bit alarmist, but it was undeniable that this was an out-and-out fact. It's one thing to be strong, but Wu Chen is really eloquent. Murasame Rain sighed, and then sighed helplessly. Now Yado Toho was still angry, so it was better not to provoke her. I don't seem to have offended you. Inside the classroom, Itsuka Shido looked at Toka with fear. To be honest, he was really scared by her power. After all, one was an elf, and the other was a human. Also, Itsuka Shido had seen the battle between Dustless and Toka Shido. Toka Shido was terrified. That Night Sword God, the teacher couldn't stand it anymore. Just as he was about to stop the two of them, a crisp bell suddenly rang. Ding ding ding, the bell signaling the end of class rang through the entire corridor. The originally quiet school instantly became noisy. I'll deal with you next time. Just you wait. She glared fiercely at Ohei Shirdao, then turned around and left arrogantly. Everyone in the class looked at this proud girl in shock. Remembering Dustless's orders, Nightblade God 10 Incense skipped away. This guy. Seeing Toka's figure, Itsuka Shido breathed a sigh of relief and muttered gloomily, is it because of what happened last time that she's so hostile toward me? When Nightblade God 10 Incense first came to this world, Kodori asked Itsuka Shido to talk to Nightblade God 10 Incense. However, Shido's luck was not good. Dustless happened to attack Nightblade God 10 Incense at that time, and Nightblade God 10 Incense, who didn't know it, put the blame on Itsuka Shido. Therefore, when the two sides met, there was a strong smell of gunpowder. If it wasn't for Dustless at that time, Itsuka Shido might have died. In the sports office. You silly girl. Wuchen looked at Nightblade God 10 Incense speechlessly and scolded angrily. I asked you to get Kite Origami's words and ask where the Forfune is. I didn't ask you to come to me now. Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shouldn't have asked such a serious question to Nightblade God 10 Incense. If she didn't do it right, Nightblade God 10 Incense might find out what she said. Forget it, I'll just find a chance to extract Nightblade God 10 Incense's memory. Dustless waved his hand and looked at Nightblade God 10 Incense impatiently. Go back to class, Nightblade God 10 Incense. I'll take care of Nightblade God 10 Incense. I'll be your new teacher in the next PE class. Don't be late. Suddenly, Nightblade God 10 Incense opened her mouth and looked at Dustless expectantly. Shouldn't it be? Seeing this, the corner of Wu Chen's mouth twitched. He scolded angrily, little girl, don't tell me you starved to death in your previous life. You just finished your breakfast not long ago, right? Can you eat so much? You let me work, but you don't give me food. This is called docking the wages of laborers. I can sue you. Nightblade God 10 Incense said seriously with a pout. Even laborers come out. As an elf, you really keep up with the times. Did you give her all these? Dustless looked at Murasame Rain gloomily, and the latter just shook her head in a daze. It seemed that she was about to fall asleep. Forget it, take it. Pointing to the transparent belt on the table, which was full of lunchboxes and various snacks, Dustless sighed. As for Nightblade God 10 Incense, I'll do it. Dustless's eyes narrowed. He just needed to find a suitable opportunity to extract her memory. In this way, he could find the whereabouts of Shinoichi Origami. Dustless could also retire from this school. The ability of Rinnegan could extract the memory of others, but it would only hurt the soul of the other party. But after several years of use, Dustless's control of Rinnegan had reached an incredible level. Even if he used the eye power to search the other party's memory, it would not hurt their soul. P.S. 3,000 flowers plus updates, 3,000 rewards plus updates, 1,000 evaluation votes plus updates, 500 automatic subscriptions plus updates. Chapter 2090. Ding ding ding, the bell rang, signaling the start of class. The noisy school quieted down once again. The spacious field was filled with people, including Dustless and a few other familiar faces. You're on time. Dustless walked over from afar with a frivolous and lazy expression. He held his head in his hands and held a blade of grass in his mouth. He wore a white tracksuit and had a faint smile on his face. Compared to the teacher, Dustless looked more like he was taking a stroll. This new PE teacher is actually late for his first class. Does he even care about us? He's not serious at all. The bell rang for 5 minutes, but Dustless was still nowhere to be seen. This caused a group of students to be dissatisfied, and they all started to complain. A bunch of brats are dissatisfied with me. A teasing tone suddenly brushed past everyone's ears. Everyone subconsciously looked over, and a young face entered everyone's ears. Dustless. A few people who knew Dustless were shocked. For example, Tabichi Origami and Itoka Shido were also in disbelief. Today is really strange. Itoka Shido muttered. Shido muttered to himself, 2 strange transfer students came out of nowhere, and even Wuchen entered this school and became a teacher. The 2 transfer students were naturally Toka Toka and Tokasaki Kurumi. This is really interesting. Tokasaki Kurumi tilted her head with a strange light in her eyes. How dare you be dissatisfied with your teacher? Now, run 10 laps around the field. Dustless ordered seriously. In his previous life, he envied teachers who gave orders. Are you kidding? The students all stared at Dustless with their eyes wide open. Although they were dissatisfied, they still ran. Many girls ran over to Dustless to ask for leave. Dustless also nodded in agreement. After all, they were on their menstrual cycle. He couldn't just ignore it. Why did you refuse my leave? Dustless, you must have done it on purpose. Yi Dao Shinshirxiang glared at Dustless. Her perfect face was filled with displeasure. Other girls could take leave, but she couldn't. How preposterous. Everyone is different, Yi Zichen said. Dustless glanced at Nightblade God Toka and said seriously, unless your period comes, I can give you time to rest. What's menstruation? Nightblade God Toka was confused. How dare you ask for leave when you don't even know this? Dustless rolled his eyes and pointed at the field. Nightblade God 10 fragrances, just run 20 laps around the field. How dare you, 25 laps. I don't want to, 30 laps then. Dustless, you win. Just wait and see. Nightblade God 10 fragrances stomped her feet. She looked like she wanted to swallow Dustless alive. However, she gave in the end. Dustless was her teacher, and she wasn't as strong as Dustless. Nightblade God 10 fragrances once disobeyed Dustless's orders. The consequences were disastrous. After Dustless suppressed her, she was stripped naked and exposed for hours. Although it was at home, Nightblade God 10 fragrances still lost face. From then on, Dustless began to threaten her. If she disobeyed, he would strip her naked and throw her clothes on the street. Since then, Nightblade God 10 fragrances didn't dare to disobey Dustless's orders. Although his methods were despicable, the effect was unparalleled. Nightblade God 10 fragrances never disobeyed Dustless's orders again. What are you doing here? Tokazaki-san. Dustless lazily sat on the grass as he stared at Toshiaki Kurumi. He yawned and said casually, Are you on leave as well? Are you also on your menstrual cycle? Do you have any evidence? This guy is really shameless. Although she maintained a warm and bright smile on her face, Toshiaki Kurumi was cursing Dustless in her heart. Her period was here. What evidence did he need? Wasn't he just trying to make things difficult for her? How dare you fight with me? Dustless glanced at Toshiaki Kurumi and laughed in his heart. Don't think I don't know that you're on leave because you want to get close to Itsuka Shido. What period? *T. Toshiaki Kurumi came to this school for one person, Itsuka Shido. She dreamed of the day when she and Itsuka Shido would become one. Even so, Dustless underestimated Toshiaki Kurumi and her boldness. The clear chirping of birds could be heard from the blue sky. The cool wind blew from afar, and the willow branches danced in the wind. Since Dustless and Toshiaki Kurumi were so close to each other, some of her hair was blown onto Dustless's face. It smells good. Dustless took a whiff and said subconsciously. Teacher, I have proof that my menstrual cycle is here. At this moment, Tokasaki Kurumi looked at the dazed Wuchin with a smile. You can even prove something like that. Elves are indeed different from the rest. Dustless was stunned when he heard Toshiaki Kurumi's answer. Just as he was about to ask, Toshiaki Kurumi's next move shocked Dustless. Toshiaki Kurumi lifted her uniform skirt and revealed her white fatu. Don't tell me. Seeing this, a trace of emotion flashed across Wuchin's face. He finally understood how Tokasaki Kurumi proved that her period had arrived. Taking off her fatu just because of a disagreement. This Toshiaki Kurumi is really bold. Dustless couldn't help but sigh. If it was any other environment, he could still accept it. However, they were in a public field. Toshiaki Kurumi actually wanted to take off her fatu in front of Dustless. Her boldness was enough to make anyone blush with shame. P.S. 3,000 fresh flowers plus more chapters, 3,000 rewards plus more chapters, 1,000 comments plus more chapters, 500 automatic subscriptions plus more chapters. Chapter 2091. Her white breasts were smooth and flawless, causing one's imagination to run wild. Even Dustless, who had been calm for many years, felt ripples in his heart at this moment. Long stockings wrapped around her white thighs, revealing her flawless skin that was as exquisite as jade. Under the black stockings, her jade-like legs were faintly discernible, causing one's heartstrings to throb. Unknowingly, Dustless's breathing had quickened. "You really dare to take it off?" His aggressive gaze circled around Toshiaki Kuzo's trousers. Dustless's lips curled into a rare smile. In all fairness, Dustless didn't believe that Toshiaki Kuzo would be so daring as to take off her breasts in public. Only an idiot would do that. But even so, for the sake of being on the safe side, Dustless still secretly set up a gray barrier to prevent others from spying. This guy, Toshiaki Kuzo, revealed her white breasts. When she saw that Dustless wasn't moved, she felt vexed and couldn't help but mutter, "Does this guy really want me to take off my breasts in front of him?" Toshiaki Kuzo was secretly depressed. She thought that it was just for show, but who would have thought that Dustless would look at her with such anticipation? If such a person could be a teacher, he was simply a beast in human face. "Student Toshiaki, how are you going to prove to me that your period is here?" Seeing Toshiaki Kuzo in a difficult position, Dustless held back his laughter and pretended to be calm. "If you don't prove it, I'll punish you by making you run 100 laps around the field." 100 laps. Hearing this, Toshiaki Kuzo's face flashed with anger. Her eyes clearly emitted a haze. Even though it was just a flash, Dustless caught it clearly. 1 lap around the school field was about 500 meters. 100 laps would be 500 by 100, which was almost 50,000 meters. "You did it on purpose, didn't you?" Finally, Tokasaki Kurumi could no longer maintain his composure and coldly said, "Brat, do you know how the word death is written?" Looking at Dustless's despicable face, Tokasaki Kurumi was certain that Dustless was doing this on purpose. "I really don't know how to write the word death." Dustless nodded. He looked at Tokasaki Kurumi and said seriously, "Why don't you teach me? This guy really doesn't know what's good for him." Hearing this, Tokasaki Kurumi was enraged. His calm eyes flashed with a savage light. He took out a spear and aimed it at Dustless. He laughed sinisterly. "Very well, I'll tell you how death is written. It's written with your blood." It was no wonder that Tokasaki Kurumi was so angry. Other girls could ask for leave if they were on their period, but when it was her turn, she had to strip off her fatness to verify her identity. How could she be so shameless? "You're on your period and you have a bad temper. Shoot me." Dustless lazily slept on the grass with his eyes closed. He said casually, "Tokasaki Kurumi, no, it's more appropriate to call you Incubus. That seems to be your code name. If you start a fight here, it'll be very difficult for you to sneak into this school in the future. You know I'm an elf." Hearing this, Tokasaki Kurumi's pupils shrank. Her body instinctively moved away from Dustless. "You're really forgetful. When we first met, didn't you take the initiative to introduce yourself as an elf? What a slow-witted girl." Dustless shook his head and picked up a blade of grass out of boredom. "How dare you mock me when I'm pointing a spear at you? You're just a mere human. How dare you?" Hearing this, Tokasaki Kurumi's expression turned cold and pulled the trigger. Bang! A large bullet was fired from the spear and headed straight for Dustless's head. "Goodbye, foolish human." Tokasaki Kurumi blew out a breath of hot air charmingly. A morbid smile appeared on her face as she stared straight at Dustless. She was enjoying the beauty of a dying person. When a person was about to die, they would reveal an unprecedented fear. This was also Tokasaki Kurumi's favorite moment. Poochie. The bullet tore through Dustless's head and pierced through it. The wound was large enough to fit an adult's fist. How boring. At least let me admire your pitiful expression when you die. It'll be nice to have a memory. Tokisaki Kurumi was unhappy. Dustless remained calm until the moment of his death. Then, do you remember my pitiful expression? A ghostly indifferent voice sounded out of nowhere. Then, a cold wind blew behind her. Fear flashed through Tokisaki Kurumi's eyes as she turned around and fired without hesitation. Bang! Another large bullet flew out and hit the bullseye. An obvious hole appeared on the head of the person who spoke. One had to admit that Tokisaki Kurumi's marksmanship was indeed amazing. Even if she didn't look at the target, she could still explode the opponent's head with just her intuition. However, the strange thing was that even though the person's head was blown off and the bullet pierced through his left eye, his body was still standing firmly. His right eye was still quietly looking at Tokisaki Kurumi. His breathing was even and he was very calm. His delicate face stared straight at Tokisaki Kurumi. You're not dead. Tokisaki Kurumi's tone was several times louder as she looked at Dustless in horror. After being shot in the head, this guy was still standing there as if nothing had happened. Was this still a weak human? If Dustless was an elf, he didn't have psychic waves and there had never been a male elf before. What kind of monster was this guy? Didn't you say you were going to teach me how to write the word death? Haven't you finished it yet? What a lousy language teacher. P.S. 3,000 flowers plus updates, 3,000 rewards plus updates, 1,000 comments plus updates, 500 automatic subscriptions plus updates. Chapter 2092. I underestimated him. Looking at the lazy Dustless cautiously, Tokisaki Kurumi felt a rare headache. She frowned when she saw the gap in Dustless's eye and her eyebrows were almost knitted together. Could it be that this guy can recover from any skill? Tokisaki Kurumi muttered to herself. Even though she spoke softly, the slick Dustless heard every word. Recover. Wrong. Dustless shook his head and explained softly, You've never injured me, so how can you recover? This is just the elemental ability of the glint fruit. It can ignore all physical attacks. Ignore physical attacks. Tokisaki Kurumi was the first to recover from her shock. Her first reaction was to laugh out loud, mocking Dustless for overestimating himself. How could a mere mortal have such a heaven-defying ability like ignore physical attacks? What else could it be other than the ravings of a lunatic? That was simply wishful thinking. Surrender, and I can give you a good job. Dustless's tone revealed a rare trace of gentleness. His expression was also very serious. Good job. Hearing this, Tokisaki Kurumi was stunned for a moment before she sneered, You know that I'm an elf, right? Do you think there's any job in this world that's suitable for elves? Tokisaki Kurumi sneered at the end of her sentence. In this world, no matter who it was, they hated elves. After all, every time they appeared, they would cause a lot of trouble. They were almost synonymous with hate. This was especially true for the Eurasian air disaster that happened decades ago. It had taken the lives of hundreds of millions of people. Other people don't have jobs suitable for elves, but I do. Staring at Tokisaki Kurumi, Dustless smiled mysteriously and said seriously, I already have 2 servants, Yonsei and Toka. Why don't you, bang bang bang? However, before Dustless could continue his nonsense, a series of bullets were fired at him. Poochie. 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 Just like before, Dustless didn't dodge and allowed the bullet to pierce through his head. If an ordinary person's head was smashed and a few large holes appeared, they would naturally die without a doubt. However, there were exceptions to everything. In Dustless's head, after a few seconds, the wound was covered by light and quickly healed. New skin grew. Damn it, could it really ignore physical attacks? Tokisaki Kurumi clicked her tongue. Her eyes were fixed on Dustless, revealing a look of deep shock. Why would such a godlike ability appear in the hands of a gigolo? Tokisaki Kurumi pouted as she spoke in a sour tone. She was like a jealous little wife who had been scolded. There are many things you don't understand, such as this. Dustless turned into a stream of light and rushed out. This damn pervert. Seeing the incoming light, Tokisaki Kurumi was shocked, and her beautiful eyes were filled with panic. Dustless's speed was something that even an elf like her couldn't achieve, let alone a human. In her panic, Tokisaki Kurumi quickly pulled the trigger again. Bang, bang, bang. Several more bullets flew out and pierced through Dustless's body. Swish, swish, swish. But what was strange and puzzling was that even after being attacked, the speed of the light didn't change. The dazzling light continued to rush towards her. Can he really ignore physical attacks? Tokisaki Kurumi was helpless. Dustless's body was transparent. Even if she could see him, she couldn't hit him. All attacks were ineffective against him. Damn it, I didn't expect to use my true strength to deal with a human. Tokisaki Kurumi was unresigned. She seemed to be unhappy that she lost to a human. After all, there was a difference between humans and elves. But today, Tokisaki Kurumi was teased by an ordinary human like Wu Qin. Especially Wu Chen's disdainful tone and unyielding attitude made her feel uncomfortable. She was clearly looking down on others. Being suppressed by a human made Tokisaki Kurumi unhappy and aggrieved. Finally, after gathering all her emotions, Tokisaki Kurumi decided to use her true strength to teach Dustless a lesson. Boom, boom, boom. Tokisaki Kurumi's young and tender body suddenly erupted with a powerful energy fluctuation. Following that, her outer clothes burst apart and turned into a black and blood-red dress. At the same time, a huge clock hung behind Tokisaki Kurumi's back. Is this your angelic form? Dustless rubbed his chin with interest and said expectantly, your ability seems to be called Carving Emperor, right? I remember that you can reverse time, teleport, and even slow down time. How do you know so much about my ability? Who told you that? Tokisaki Kurumi's eyes widened. It was hard to believe that Dustless was making it up. If that was the case, it would be too much of a coincidence. Everything Dustless said was true. That's not important. Dustless waved his arm and moved his thumb gently. Bring it on. Little Dud is going to release your most beautiful light. Don't ask me why, because this is your best performance. P.S. 3,000 fresh flowers plus more chapters, 3,000 rewards plus more chapters, 1,000 comments plus more chapters, 500 automatic subscriptions plus more chapters. At the same time, Dustless's figure gradually lost its texture and turned into a stream of light that rushed out. How fast was the bullet? That wasn't important. What was certain was that the bullet would pierce through Tokisaki Kurumi's head the moment it left the gun barrel. But what made Tokisaki Kurumi dumbfounded was that after a few seconds, she was also fine. Where was the bullet? Out of curiosity, Tokisaki Kurumi looked over. It would have been better if she didn't look. After witnessing this shocking scene, Tokisaki Kurumi's pupils shrunk. Her beautiful eyes were filled with deep shock. She saw a seemingly delicate arm easily catch a golden bullet between her middle finger and index finger. She shifted her gaze and looked at the owner of the arm. The culprit was Dustless. Swish, swish, swish. After being stunned for a few seconds, Tokisaki Kurumi hurriedly retreated. Fortunately, I reacted fast enough. Otherwise, I would have been killed by this guy. After putting some distance between herself and Dustless, Tokisaki Kurumi heaved a sigh of relief. You reacted fast enough. The cold voice carried with it a cold wind. Tokisaki Kurumi immediately shivered. This feeling was no different from falling into an ice cave. It was suffocating. Who is it? Tokisaki Kurumi raised her head in fear. Being stared at by this ruthless gaze, she felt like she was wandering in hell. What a boastful little girl. The cold voice sounded again, reflecting endless ridicule and disdain. It's you. Following the source of the voice, she saw dustless. Your reaction is fast. You think too highly of yourself. In front of the speed of light, do you think your fast reaction is useful? I really don't know where your morbid confidence comes from. What a joke. Any move under the speed of light was futile. Child's play. Dustless threw out the rifle bullet in his hand. He crossed his arms and said lazily, "Carving Emperor's long needle and short needle are ancient rifles and pistols respectively. They fire Carving Emperor's ability as bullets. If the bullet doesn't hit the target, you won't be able to activate your ability. In other words, the moment you fire the bullet, I can completely stop it," Dustless said confidently. The bullet was fast, but it was still a far cry from the speed of light. This guy, Tokisaki Kurumi's expression changed. Her hair on both sides of her temples was covered in water droplets. If it was in the past, Tokisaki Kurumi would have treated this as a joke. However, looking at Carving Emperor's bullet on the ground, Tokisaki Kurumi couldn't laugh. This bullet was intercepted by Dustless. It was the bullet she fired. The moment it was about to shatter her head, it was intercepted by Dustless. If the bullet couldn't hit the target and Carving Emperor's ability couldn't be activated, then Tokisaki Kurumi, an elf, became immortal. Chapter 2094. In this world, there was no invincible ability. Every ability had a flaw that no one knew about. It was invincible now because no one had discovered its weakness. For example, Dustless's glinting fruit, elementization, ability was invincible in this world, but in the previous world where pirates were everywhere, they could easily touch Dustless's body, such as armament hockey and sea stone. The reason why Tokisaki Kurumi could run rampant in the past was because she hadn't met a natural enemy. But this time, she was unlucky. She didn't look at the almanac when she went out and met a powerful enemy like Dustless. My chances of winning are slim, maybe even none. Tokisaki Kurumi was quite unwilling to give up. She calculated the chances of winning and helplessly found that she didn't have the ability to fight Dustless. Dustless's speed was faster than the speed of a bullet. In other words, he could easily defeat Tokisaki Kurumi before she used her ability. Blocking the bullet with his bare hands was the best example. I lost. She threw away the two guns in her hand and seemed to have accepted her fate. It wasn't that she wanted to surrender. The ability of Emperor was actually a bullet. If it couldn't hit the target, the ability couldn't be used. Kill me if you have the guts. Even if she was at her wit's end, Tokisaki Kurumi still bit her thin lips and looked at Dustless very stubbornly. She sneered, "If you don't kill me, I won't let you go and harass you for the rest of your life." As her voice fell, Tokisaki Kurumi's different-colored eyes flashed with a cold chill. She threatened, "Not only you, but also your two little servants, Night Sword God Toka and Yoshino, I will bury them with me. Harass me for the rest of my life." Hearing this, Dustless's expression was extremely strange. He said sarcastically, "I remember that you didn't want to be my maid. Now you want to harass me for the rest of my life. You exposed your shameless heart and still want to harass me for the rest of my life. Shameless woman. Puchi." Tokisaki Kurumi almost vomited blood. She looked at Dustless with fire in her eyes. "If you don't kill me, when you fall into my hands in the future, I will make you beg for death. That's it." Although Tokisaki Kurumi's tone was harsh and aggressive, as if she wanted to swallow Dustless alive, the latter's reaction was calm. There wasn't even a trace of anger. Tokisaki Kurumi. Stop trying to be smart. Do you think I don't know your abilities? Dustless's cold face raised a bit of mockery. He said sarcastically, "Carve emperors, bullet of 8, can make his past reappear." Although the doppelganger doesn't have the strength of the main body, it has its own will and spiritual equipment. It can be stored indefinitely in the shadow, and can be summoned at any time before it is used up. This was also the reason why Tokisaki Kurumi could revive after being killed so many times. Who told you all this? Tokisaki Kurumi sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at Dustless in a daze. She naturally wouldn't tell a stranger about her trump card, so where did Dustless learn about it? Even if it was nonsense, it was too much of a coincidence, and what he said was true. Who told me? In fact, it's very simple. Maybe I have the same ability as you. Maybe it's just a guess of our abilities. Wu Qin shrugged perfunctorily. Of course, he wouldn't say that he had transmigrated. That's why I won't kill you. Even if I do, it's useless. You'll revive. Suddenly, Dustless rubbed his chin. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a teasing smile. Since I can't kill you, I'll torture you. What are you trying to do? Tokisaki Kurumi's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. She knew that things weren't going well and subconsciously took a step back. I can't forgive someone who is hostile to me and dares to provoke me. Don't worry, I just want to give you a punishment that you'll never forget. Dustless walked over slowly. Every step he took, Tokisaki Kurumi would feel an inexplicable pressure. She couldn't help but feel irritated. Bam! Tokisaki Kurumi was stunned when she bumped into something behind her. This is Lai Chanhai's field. Where did the wall come from? The moment she turned her head, Tokisaki Kurumi was stunned. She suddenly realized that she and Dustless were trapped in a small transparent space. Is this a barrier? When was it set up? No wonder no one paid attention to our duel. Tokisaki Kurumi touched the invisible but real barrier in a daze. The hard touch made her feel a little dazed. To be able to set up a barrier without being noticed by Tokisaki Kurumi, was it because she was too engrossed in it, or was Dustless just too mysterious? Could it be? She stared straight at Dustless. Tokisaki Kurumi stared straight at Dustless. Her eyes flickered non-stop. Girls tend to have wild imaginations. With such strength, could it be that she's the starter sprite? Dustless's strength was terrifying. He was definitely not an ordinary human, nor was he like AST's Tokichi Origami. He did not need to rely on equipment. Dustless relied on his own strength. Starter sprite. Although Tokisaki Kurumi's voice was soft, Dustless still heard it. What the hell is that? I'm not, and I don't know much about it. I'm not interested in knowing. All you need to know is that anyone who dares to be presumptuous in my territory must be punished. Your territory. Tokisaki Kurumi had a strange expression. She looked at the huge field. Could it be that Dustless's territory was like Chanhai? I'm talking about this planet, Dustless added after seeing the confused look on the girl's face. Alright, Tokisaki Kurumi, accept your punishment. As soon as he finished speaking, Dustless blinked to Tokisaki Kurumi's side. His sudden action almost made Tokisaki Kurumi vomit blood. P.S. 3,000 fresh flowers plus updates, 3,000 rewards plus updates, 1,000 reviews plus updates, 500 automatic subscriptions plus updates. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.